turn things around.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at Teen.
All right, Stacey, we should be good to go.
This is Urban Family Talk.
This is Jeff.
Oh, hi, Jeff.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacey on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Now, Stacey Washington.
Hello. Okay. We're live. We're with you right now here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Guess what's happening right now? Well, quite a few things. We are doing a live show, obviously, so bear with us. Keep us in your prayers. We have a lot of things going on in the electronicals, the interwebs, down in Tupelo through one of the providers that services all of the syndication. So just bear with us today on the show. If you're listening on the app and it's dropping or anything, you can go to one of the other alternative means of listening, which primarily AFR.net, urbanfamilytalk.com. Those are great places to go to live stream the show. You can even do that on your phone. So if you're used to using the app, I'm sorry, until that's resolved, it doesn't have anything to do with us in particular. It's the service provider. Today on the program, I have so much to talk to you about. I just have so much to get into, and I'm so excited to get into it, really. First off, we're going to be talking about the Manafort juror. Her name is Paula Duncan. She actually showed up on Shannon Bream's show last night, and she was a fascinating interview. A Trump supporter, and she said she wasn't afraid of any threats or any crazy stuff like that, so she was going to come out and let her side of things be known and kind of speak, at least for her portion of what happened in that jury room. And it was riveting conversation between she and Shannon Bream. And then we also have today Mason Weaver. He's an author and pundit and political commentator, and he just happens to be a St. Louis metro area resident, as I am. So it's going to be fun to catch up with him and talk to him about news of the day. And there's a lot of it, a ton of news of the day going on. So right now, I want to also, we have another guest in hour two, Geoff Dickens. He's going to be on with us today. He's from Newsbusters. And I know you guys are going to be shocked by this. You're totally going to be like off the rails when you hear that Geoff is going to tell us just how many minutes have been spent on the coverage of the Manafort trial in comparison to other things. Yeah, it's biased. It's way out of whack, and he's going to come on and talk to us about that. So right now, listen, you got to go to StaceyOnTheRight.com and hit the subscribe button, and you got to hang with us over at Twitter and Instagram and all that good stuff, because they're trying to clamp down on our voices, and the only way to stop that is for you to be there with us and, hitting those notifications, see first notifications, et cetera, et cetera. So it is, in my opinion, just simple knowledge that campaign finance violations are not, the law on that is not applied equally. Now, when we talk about the Cohen mess that's going on with, Cohen flipping on the president's quote unquote, trying to save his own neck, quote unquote, when someone flips on someone else, it doesn't necessarily mean that the person they flipped on, who is the true target of the investigation, who nobody cares about Cohen or his finance violations, if they did, Rosie O'Donnell would also be under indictment, then it's really not about Michael Cohen. The only thing they want him to do is say things they want to hear in the pursuit of getting Donald Trump. Now, when you look at it that way, a lot of other things become perfectly clear, like the Manafort issues. So everyone keeps acting as if the guilty verdict for Manafort on 8 of the 18 counts means that somehow the president is guilty of something. Paul Manafort and the president didn't have a close relationship before he called on Manafort for his services for the brokered convention that they thought was going to be the case at the Republican Party National Convention. They thought that it was going to be a brokered convention and that establishment elites were going to be able to get enough votes to usurp what they saw as their victory, which it went exactly as they planned. They won the nomination. But instead of having it brokered, it didn't happen. And part of the reason why a lot of insiders say it didn't happen is because those who thought they might be able to pull off a brokered convention and usurp the will of the American people on the right in selecting Donald Trump as the nominee, when they saw Paul Manafort come on the scene and they knew he'd been through a brokered convention before and that he was an expert and he was a fixer and a ringer, someone brought in specifically in the instance of the probability of this so-called brokered convention, it all fizzled out and Donald Trump sailed through and was the party nominee. So then at the conclusion of that, Paul Manafort was summarily told, thank you for your services. You've been awesome. Here's your last paycheck and see ya, because he wasn't a member of Trump World. Only members of Trump World who were newly introduced and performed well or were old Trump World affiliates, associates, what have you, remained after Manafort was gone. It was like a house cleaning. A whole bunch of people got dumped off, including Manafort. Once he was gone, Kellyanne Conway, new to Trump World but came in and performed, and others, they took the helm and led that campaign through to victory in November of 2016. So the idea that somehow old bank fraud allegations and, all kinds of tax malfeasance and things that were going on with Paul Manafort 10, 15, 20 years ago that he's now being prosecuted for only because he worked on the Trump campaign. This is not due to an audit or something, matter of course, or routine through the IRS. The IRS missed all this stuff. All of a sudden, it's important because Paul Manafort can be connected closely by way of the campaign to Donald Trump. And what they were hoping for was that Paul Manafort would say, you know what, while I was on the campaign, I did hear Donald Trump talking about eliciting money from or support from the Russians. I did hear him orchestrating the hack of the DNC. I did hear him coordinating with them on the WikiLeaks, the drip, drip, drip that WikiLeaks was doing with the emails that were hacked from the DNC. I did hear him say, how can you help me materially impact this election, namely make me president? But instead of getting that from Paul Manafort, what they got was a stony wall of silence, and now he's been convicted on 8 counts. Now, there's corresponding charges that come in on the other side of town. He's going to have to go through that trial next. But this is pretty rough for him because, yes, according to this juror, the evidence was irrefutable that he committed the acts that he was convicted of, the bank fraud and all of that. But it's one of those things where he actually was, it's not like he was sitting in the sidelines and saying, I want to be on Trump's campaign. They reached out to him because of his expertise and his background with that one brokered convention, and that he knew his way around the Republican National Convention. And so because of that, he committed some wrongdoing, but because of his affiliation with Trump, now he's being prosecuted on that, while other people who've done the same kind of wrong are strolling around, lackadaisically enjoying their lives, drinking their Starbucks, and just doing the thing, being Americans. They're not going to be prosecuted because they don't have any ties to Donald Trump. Rosie O'Donnell has reared herself up again, and now she's showing up on cable news talking trash, and she should be getting indicted and prosecuted for her campaign violations. The same kinds. Hers are actually more severe than the ones that Dinesh D'Souza was convicted of, which is why Donald Trump pardoned him. It's not so much that he didn't admit that he did something wrong. He went to jail for something that Rosie O'Donnell did more of, and she's walking around free, never been charged. And it's the same situation with, theoretically, I won't say it's the same situation, but Hillary Clinton's not being prosecuted while Donald Trump has been held up and he's being vilified on a daily basis. And what we know that Hillary Clinton broke the law. We don't know beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt. We don't have a conviction. We don't even have indictments. We don't even have charges or anything leveled against the president. But he's being held up as, now the new term for him is unindicted co-conspirator. First of all, in order to be called an unindicted co-conspirator, that's a designation that's given to you by law enforcement that basically says, we have a lot of evidence against you and we strongly suspect that you're guilty, but we're not charging you because of, and then there's some valid reason why they're not charging. That is not the case here with the President of the United States. So now if you're thinking this through and if you're following it through to its logical conclusion, you can see why Rudy Giuliani and Jay Sekulow and others on the Trump team, legal team, do not want him to place himself in jeopardy by being interviewed by Robert Mueller. Because if he got it wrong that he knew about the payments to Stormy Daniels, which as morally repugnant as you may find that, and it is paying someone off that you had in a relationship with. I mean, that's like Hollywood type stuff, but it's not against the law. And so if he did that, it's not about the campaign, because everyone who's on a campaign is trying to materially impact the election on behalf of that campaign because they're trying to win, right? So let's just break this down logically here for one more minute before we get to this audio. We have to get this down. While everyone is prancing around on their cloven hooves going, impeachment, impeachment, and tossing their little heads back and, popping the champagne and the bubbly, the fact is we have zero evidence that the president has done anything wrong. So perhaps he is, I don't know, perhaps he has said conflicting statements in the public eye, which it's problematic, but it's not a crime. But if he makes conflicting statements to Mueller or someone on the Mueller team in the investigation, that's a crime. If he says the truth to them, let's say he just goes in and tells them the truth, which is what we would hope that the president would do. They could have Cohen come in and say the opposite. Cohen could have already said things that are untrue. And if those things contradict and the prosecution believes Cohen, then that's a charge against the president that he has to defend. And that is where all of this gets super hairy. So I like to set these things up before we go into them. What we have going on now is you've got this Manafort juror, and she's explaining the background on the jury decision. And I'm telling you, if you haven't seen it, go to therightscoop.com, therightscoop.com. Later on, after the show, obviously, take a watch, because it's interesting to watch her as she talks. You get the feeling that after listening to her statements that she took this very seriously. She had to drive quite a lengthy distance round trip every day to deliberate. And so this was a commitment for her. And she said it was her civic duty. But this lady, Paula Duncan, she's giving you this insider view into what it was like on this jury and what these people were really like. And contrary to what the media would have us believe, that it was a bunch of, rabid, knuckle dragging Trump supporters who were just like going, ooh, 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 and not really considering the evidence, or that it was a bunch of high and mighty elite liberal minds educated at the best Ivy League universities, seriously deliberating and considering everything that was presented to them because they had their high honor and civic duty to consider. Instead of it being that garbage, it was a bunch of Americans who knew they'd been called for jury duty and that the case could expose them to ridicule and personal jeopardy, and chose to do the job anyway. And that they took it seriously regardless of their political affiliation, because they thought if the law has been broken, it is our job to, convict on laws that were broken, or if he's innocent, which he is until proven guilty, we are to set him free. So I'm not sure if we're going to get to both of these, but let's get to number 2, Manafort juror Paula Duncan. She's talking about the background on the jury decision. It's number 2.
Okay, so you said you wanted Manafort to be innocent. Why?
Because even his critics said he was a brilliant man at what he did. And why wouldn't Trump want him to help with the campaign?
But you are a President Trump supporter.
I am, very much so.
So what did you think about the charges being brought against Manafort? Did you think, you said going in you wanted to think that he was innocent. Did you think they were legitimate on the front end versus what you ultimately decided on the back end?
Well, the charges were legitimate, but the prosecution tried to make the case about the Russian collusion right from the beginning, and of course the judge shut them down on that. Mm-hmm. We did waste a bit of time with that shenanigans, but yeah.
Did the president's name come up in jury deliberations? Was this politicized in any way?
It was, just because in the evidence there were references to Trump and to his son-in-law and to the Trump campaign, especially with the Steve Kalk and the pay-to-play issue.
Hey, Stacey, we're actually about to go to break.
Okay, let me just take us a break. Hey,
Okay.
Listen, we're running out of this. We'll return to it. Let's go to the break, and when we get back, we'll have Mason Weaver. Stay right there.
So sorry about that, Stacey. Okay, cool. Okay, so for the next segment, you have your guest Mason Weaver, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So I'm about to call him, and right when you come back from the break is when I'll play clip 6, correct?
Actually, yeah, let's play that one coming back.
Okay, cool. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, you got it.
And Family Association.
I'm a laundryman. I'm the son of a laundryman too. I love clean clothes. I love the business. I love everything about it. This project was built.
And get Redeem Clean products at afastore.net. That's afastore.net.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. One day, a close friend of mine was driving home after a very long, hard day at the office. He was exhausted. Unfortunately, he fell asleep at the wheel while driving on the expressway. He ran into an SUV carrying a mother and her 3 children. Both vehicles flipped over and were totally destroyed. Now, here's the miracle. Everybody walked away with relatively minor injuries. Their lives were spared. Some of us have fallen asleep on the expressway of life. Perhaps you're listening to me right now and you're not sure about your eternal destination. You've ignored all the warnings. Or maybe you are a follower of Christ, but you haven't been following so closely lately. There's stuff in your life that you need to take care of, and God has been warning you. He has been saying to you, look, pay attention to this. In fact, the Bible teaches that our whole world is on a collision course, and there will be casualties. Judgment is a sure thing, but God will spare and reward those who are faithful. 2 Chronicles chapter 34, verses 27 through 28 gives a sobering word here. God has had enough of the compromise and sin of his people, and now he says it's time for judgment. He said to good King Josiah, because your heart was tender and you humbled yourself before God, I truly have heard you, declares the Lord. Behold, I will gather you to your fathers, and you shall be gathered to your grave in peace, so your eyes will not see all the evil which I will bring on this place and on its inhabitant.
Your guest is ready, Stacy.
Remember today,
Thank you.
God does not want you to perish. He wants to spare your life. Now, right now, settle the issue. Surrender your life to Christ.
Legacy Moment is a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Global Ministries.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
If you start arming teachers and you look at the statistics and say that there are black and brown students who are being disciplined more than their white counterparts, you could then start seeing statistics where potentially black students are getting shot or in accidents when their teachers are trying to shoot or trying to do gun safety measures. So there's this idea that the NAACP and other advocacy groups say not only are we looking at this as an issue, but it's also the idea that racially this could be a problem.
That's Yamiche Alcindor, and she was on television talking about the possibility, she's on MSNBC, talking about the possibility that if we arm teachers to defend them and themselves and our children against armed attackers and mass shooters, that somehow those same teachers who are all liberals, all members of the National Education Association, I'm just going by what they always tell us, all highly educated, highly trained, elite individuals who are better equipped to tell our children and teach them about morals and education and everything else than even their own parents. Those children are not belong to you. They are belong to all of us. Remember that one? These same upright individuals, paragons of virtue, people who are better than us by far, would also, if given the opportunity, just shoot up any black kids in the vicinity. You get that? You catch that? That's that awesome double standard liberalism right there. That's where your brain collides with itself because there's competing thoughts in there, and none of the thoughts make sense, but they're opposing thoughts that can't exist in the same space-time continuum, and so little explosions happen. Not the synapses firing, but little explosions of, whoa, yeah. So I want to talk about that and more with our next guest. We have Mason Weaver. He's the author of numerous books and really one of the best political commentators we have in this country on not just racial issues because he sports the permanent tan, but on issues that intersect our faith and our politics and how we walk that out on a daily basis. Mason, thanks for joining the show today.
I am never politically correct, but always politically right.
I know. I love that. And this is important because I really need you to help me break this down. According to Yamiche Alcindor, if teachers are armed, they're going to end up just shooting up a bunch of black kids all over the place, willy-nilly, and forget the mass shooters. They're just going to be shooting kids during their safety exercises. And
target practice.
Yeah. It's just going to be black kids everywhere getting shot up by their own teachers who we were told love them more than their parents do. Weren't we told that?
Yes. Now, Stacey, here's the problem. Here's why you don't understand. You are a decent woman. you have a fallacy in life that things are as they are because of the goodness. Teachers, and let's be honest, teachers in public schools, in inner city public schools, are child abusers. They're pushing out kids. It's just gang prep. And they believe, liberals in general believe they own you. They're slave managers. It was a party of slavery. It's a part of the plantation. They believe you belong to them, and their job is to train your children to work for their children. And so they want you to desire to demand minimum wage, never maximum wage, to demand low-income housing, never high-income housing. They want you to think, as a black person, that every problem facing you requires white people to do something because you're home, you're helpless. They do not like you. And what you're doing as an educated, intelligent, articulate, loud-mouthed black woman, they can stand you, sister.
Well, I know that much for sure because that's on my mentions. I go on Twitter and I'm like, someone's like, you can't really be black. So I tweeted back. I was like, I'm black. My husband's black. The kids are black. And all the guns are black. Most of the guns are black.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah. And she got mad. The person who tweeted me that actually got mad and said, get out of my mentions, profanity and all that. She was triggered because I said most of my guns are black. Not all of them, but most of them. I was just joking because obviously in her world, there are no people who think any differently than herself. So she stumbles across me on Twitter and says, I can't possibly be black because I've got to be like a made up avatar. Really? It's so easy to Google and find out if I'm a real person. You can see videos of me. Either video has really come up a lot or I'm real. One or the other. So I'm seeing.
It's bad lighting. I mean, look where you live. You know you're a white woman.
Well, I guess so. Yeah, I do live out here in the suburbs.
They really expect us to debate. What liberals are good at is assigning intentions, motives. They're saying you do this because they give you the motive, because you hate black people, because you. And they can't tell the motives. They can't read your mind. Liberals cannot tolerate anybody, any thought different from theirs because they're led by their heart, not by their brain. And their heart tells them, we got to take care of you because they're superior. They're superior. After they're superior to you, but out of the goodness of their heart, they're going to take care of you.
Yeah, they know better than we do. And so there's that. And I'm surprised that she would say that, not because understand, Mason, I get it. She thinks that, even well-meaning liberals, if given the chance, will kill black people because she believes the police are killing a ton of black people. And she believes that the most pressing issue is that white people are killing black people when the statistics from the government show that's not even close to the case. But it's not just that. It's like every issue we see them with, Mason, every issue, whether it's teachers, ones who want to, they're not forced to carry guns, just ones who want to be trained and certified can carry a firearm, whether it's that or whether it's the issue with the president that we're watching right now, where all the liberals actually think there's an impeachment imminent for President Trump because two people who were associated with him or worked for him at one point in their lives did wrong things on their own, separate and apart from the president, and somehow that makes him guilty just because they were working together. One of them was his attorney, et cetera, et cetera. It's these leaps of fancy that I just can't understand.
Again, that's the problem. You are based in reality. They're based in make-believe. They think we can visualize world peace. They be the same clowns that believe that man-made global warming is going to kill the kids. The truth is irrelevant to them. It doesn't matter. That's why I get so frustrated debating with them. The truth is irrelevant. They really know the truth. They know the truth. They reject the truth while knowing it is true, and they accept the lie knowing it is a lie. And so it's hard for you. It's like trying to wake somebody who's pretending to be asleep.
It really is. It's worse than that, because you can see the person squinching their eyes together and you know they're awake, but they just won't get up. It's like a game they're playing with you. And after a while, you start to feel a little crazy. And so let's unpack this a little bit.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Our job is not to convince them. Our job is to tell them. And we spend too much time trying to convince them. You cannot go down. Someone asked on another radio program this week, do I ever come to the black community and tell them the truth? The reason black folks don't vote Republican because we don't go and tell them. I'm saying, why would I go down and talk to somebody who was throwing rocks at me and spitting in my face and confronting me at a restaurant? If you want to leave the plantation, if you want to leave that abusive man, if you want to leave the Democratic Party who's abusing you and your children, I can talk to you. I'm not going to debate with another grown person about their political beliefs because it's different from mine. They're wrong, but I can't help them. I can only help those who want to come to what I am. That's why my walkaway was 25 years ago. Yeah. I wasn't walked away. I was snatched away by the truth.
And you're talking this is some serious, like, this is a conversation that has to be had, because a lot of times we hear, I've even been guilty of saying this myself. I'll go ahead and out myself first. I've said, we don't have enough outreach from the Republicans to the black community. But the fact is, the walkaway movement shows that when people get fed up with what they have, they will seek out another opportunity. And the information that we're talking about is out there. It's true. The truth is out there for anybody who's a Democrat, anyone who lives in the inner city, anyone who's going to their kids going to a school with no air conditioning that's unaccredited or provisionally accredited, anyone who sees their surroundings and says, actually the Democrats have been in charge of this for the whole time. Maybe I should check somebody else out. We're already here telling the truth. We already have everything they need. All they have to do is say, email. It's as quick as a click of the button on your phone. All of a sudden now you've got a whole bunch of people who are interested in helping you walk away. All you got to do is take the first step. You're right.
To prepare a place for them to walk to.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot go and rescue folks. Even the Underground Railroad only took slaves who wanted to go to freedom. Nobody knocked on master's door to talk about those slaves. We have to be prepared for that abusive woman to leave that husband at 3 o'clock in the morning. We had better have a place for them. Mm-hmm. We cannot bring those clowns out. I'm not going to argue with Al Sharpton and Louis Farrakhan. I'm not going to debate with Jesse Jackson. But when you want to leave, listen, folks, they know 8 generations we've been supporting Democrats. What have they done that we can brag about? They own every ghetto in America. You're not blind. You're not stupid. You are voting for the best abuser. So I cannot help you be comfortable in your abuse. They're going to abuse you. You're going to get more of what you are asking for. Today is Christmas Bell. A record employment rate, black high school dropouts are now working. Mm-hmm. And Democrats are saying, vote for us, we're going to take you back to slavery. They're promising to take the nation back to captivity. I cannot wait for November. You have a clear choice now, freedom or slavery. It's up to us.
And they're talking about undoing the historic tax reform package that is now driving an economic boom to the tune of 4.1% GDP. They're even, I've had people on the show who I actually respect them, and I think they have great knowledge and expertise, but in their minds, there's no way we can sustain this kind of growth. We have to go back to a 2.1% GDP. It has to happen. This time next year, we'll be back there. And it's fine for them to predict that because we don't know what's going to happen. Just like the polls didn't know Trump was going to be president.
Same people, right?
Yeah, well, the same people who didn't think Trump would be the president. It's the same group of people, but they just don't have any. There's no way to kind of penetrate that bubble and say, look, this is real.
They know the truth. They know the truth. They thrive in poverty and misery. They thrive. You are a bright, beautiful rose bush, and they are fungus. They have to survive in darkness, and you have to thrive in light. They cannot even comprehend where you are. Prosperity, what you're saying to them is that you're going to make people independent of needing them, having their own income, taking care of their own family, having savings in their own bank. They can't comprehend that. They want people dependent, ignorant, scared, and looking to them to take care of them. These are slave managers. They will never comprehend what you're preaching.
And so you're getting a lot of love in the comments on the Facebook stream. They love Mason Weaver. You know,
I love you all too.
Yeah, we have the best audience over here at AFR and Urban Family Talk. It's the best. And so, well, I would agree with you because I love the other hosts on this network. I got to say, Mason, let's go to the whole Manafort thing. So first of all, can you and I just get a consensus on? I hate the campaign finance garbage. See, in my opinion, the only reason we have campaign finance laws is because Democrats don't want Republicans contributing to their candidates at the same level that they contribute to. So it's a way of trying to suppress speech on behalf of people, and especially small donors, like people who donate small. The rules are set up so that it can catch you. You know, you get to a place where you actually have a little extra money to give, and you can't give it because, well, there's a limit on that, and you can't give this before that date, and this is that and that. So, but by the time you make your way through the maze, you just put your money back. You're like, I don't want to get in trouble. I'm not going to give, and that's the point.
That's your union.
Yeah.
You spend your money as you want to.
We should be able to spend it however we want to. Whether if George Soros can create thousands of these think tanks to influence our, state attorney generals, and he can do all of that in the background, and the liberals don't care about that, then why should people like Dinesh D'Souza, who was actually caught up in some of this drama, he overgave and then, was convicted, but Rosie O'Donnell overgave under pseudonyms and was never even tried. You see how that works? It's not even the same standard.
They're not trying to be fair. They're trying to rule. I'm not trying to be fair. I want to dominate. I don't want to get along. I don't want to find common ground. They're crooked, and they're dangerous. Everywhere they have control over anyone's life on this planet is total domination. They do not believe in freedom. They don't understand freedom. So therefore, I want to make them a footnote in history. I want to destroy the progressive ideology in America. I want to take back control of our schools. I do not want to work with them. I want to destroy them.
Well, all I got to say is that's what they're trying to do to us. So your path is the one of most resistance in response to what they're doing. And if anybody who doesn't understand what we're talking about, I'm going to go over later on in the show this story about this transgender driver's license bill. So over in Germany, I'm sure you've seen this. Germany, all the European countries, Denmark, places like that, they're giving an extra, it's like a checkbox on the birth certificate. So you can put male, female, or X. And the X means no gender or gender fluid or whatever you like it to mean. You can select that for your child. So they want that on the driver's licenses because whatever you have on the birth document, you can get on the driver's license. So they're now adding that. So in California, they wanted to do that. And this brilliant Republican legislator said, well, if we're going to decide about X, we need to also consider all 72 of the genders that are offered by Facebook. And so he entered each of the 72 genders of Facebook has created as an individual amendment to the bill so that all of those had to be considered before they could get to X. The liberals knew if they argued over which of those was okay, that they would obliterate their reasoning behind adding X. So they just tabled the whole thing and decided not to vote on it.
So they have male, female, and unnatural.
Right. No, imaginary. Because your DNA tells you what gender you are.
The purpose of nature, the entire purpose of every living creature is to reproduce itself. So these clowns are saying they're post-nature. I don't know what it is. But every living creature's main desire. Ask my 15-year-old granddaughter that I'm keeping close eyes on. Reproduction. I don't understand none of this mess except to realize they are fallen.
Well,
and they want
it's
to
true.
get us to compromise on our principles to make them comfortable in their sin.
Absolutely. And we're not going to do it. Thank you so much, Mason. Give us the website as we go out to the break here.
MasonWeaver.com. Easy to give me money. My books, tapes, everything's available online. MasonWeaver.com. Thank you, dear. I'm a fan of yours.
Hey, thank you, Mason. It's good to talk to you. Talk to you again soon. We'll be back with more right after this. All right, guys? Stay there.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
In practice each week, our team would run our plays against the look squad. That's what we call our backup players who simulate the other team's techniques as closely as possible. When we run a play and see it executed successfully in practice, we have the confidence to run it successfully during the game. Visualization increases chances of success, not just in football but in any area of life. Think of life as practice and the visions and instructions of Scripture as a look squad. When you read God's Word on a regular basis, you'll discover what your future holds. Seeing God in your tomorrow is the key to having confidence and courage today.
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place. Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
Lonnie Poindexter.
Don't ever ask God for patience. Just say, oh, Lord, help me to be more patient. No, don't do that. Well, why, Lonnie? Why shouldn't I do that? He'll give it to you, but you're not going to like how you get it. Well, Lonnie, what do you mean? How do you get patience? Trials and tribulations, my brethren. That's how you get it.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. There's a new slogan out. You are enough. It's the latest foray into convincing people that self-love is the pathway to freedom and success. This is just repackaged self-esteem nonsense of the same variety preached by secular thought leaders a few decades ago. Instead of going to church, we are encouraged to go to sporting events in huge stadiums on Sunday, or stay home and read the newspaper. Instead of studying the Word of God, we're told to meditate on ourselves while holding crystals and humming. How ridiculous! Joy comes from knowing who we are in Christ. Philippians 2:3 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. So in essence, the opposite of everything we've heard. The meek will inherit the earth. Confidence comes from working hard and living a godly life. Instead of looking for self-esteem, look for God in His scriptures, in His creation, in serving people. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Okay, so you said you wanted Manafort to be innocent. Why?
Because even his critics said he was a brilliant man at what he did. And why wouldn't Trump want him to help with the campaign?
But you are a President Trump supporter.
I am, very much so.
So what did you think about the charges being brought against Manafort? Did you think, you said going in you wanted to think that he was innocent. Did you think they were legitimate on the front end versus what you ultimately decided on the back end?
Well, the charges were legitimate, but the prosecution tried to make the case about the Russian collusion right from the beginning, and of course the judge shut them down on that. We did waste a bit of time with that shenanigans, but yeah.
Did the president's name come up in jury deliberations? Was this politicized in any way?
It was, just because in the evidence there were references to Trump and to his son-in-law and to the Trump campaign, especially with the Steve Kalk and the pay-to-play issue. So, yeah, it did come up.
Did you feel like there were jurors who were either, like yourself, pro-President Trump or anti, and that influenced their reasoning in any way?
No, I don't. I think we all went in there like we were supposed to and assumed that Mr. Manafort was innocent. We did due diligence, we applied the evidence, our notes, the witnesses, and we came up with the guilty verdicts on the 8 counts.
So the 11 of
welcome back to the show, everybody. Thanks to Mason Weaver for coming on and joining in today. It was great to speak with him, and he's always brilliant in his analysis. And I want to just point you guys to the fact that You know, it was the two of us having a conversation, and he happens to be of the permanent tan as I am, yet we're both able to think clearly and see our way past all of the accusations of racism that are constantly leveled towards Republicans. And so if he and I can see through it, and so many other, and I know I always get dinged on this when I say there are millions of black conservatives. Well, there are 40 million blacks in America, right? So if 10% of black Americans are moderate to conservative, then that's around 4 million, right? Okay, so millions is more than one. So I'm right. So yeah, millions of blacks and black Americans can see past these so-called allegations of racism and are making it in America. Because I've yet to meet a black Republican who is, you know, poverty-stricken. It's as Ann Coulter says, we have the best blacks. I loved it when she said that. I just laughed and laughed and laughed when she was on TV, and she said so matter-of-factly, "Oh, of course he's a Republican. We have the best blacks." And if you can't sit up and laugh at that, come on. I mean, this is America. We have the right to be tickled when somebody says something that's just brutally honest and also hilarious. And so when Mason and I were talking just now, it just occurred to me, you know, not at one point did we have to argue about whether or not Republicans are racist, because that is just a figment of the imagination of the left. They have to argue that because otherwise then they have to talk policy and they got nowhere to go on policy. Yeah, there are racists in every political party, but is the Republican Party the party of racists? If you believe that, you need to get your Dinesh D'Souza education on. He's done all the documentaries about the so-called switch where all the racists were once Democrats and then they moved to the Republican Party. That has already... Yeah, no, sorry, no. So just coming to the break there, we redid that audio so you could hear the end where Paula Duncan talks about how all these jurors are on this deliberation and they're on this panel, they're on this jury, and they're considering the evidence against Paul Manafort. In the beginning, you know, the judge really had to take the prosecution to task because they kept talking about collusion and trying to drag Trump into it. When the charges that they leveled were all about bank fraud, tax evasion, et cetera, et cetera. And when he finally got them to just let go of their little pacifier, which is Trump collusion, when he finally got them weaned off of that, they had a case. Shannon Bream says, you said you wanted to believe he was innocent, but it wasn't that jurors wanted him to be innocent or wanted to believe he was innocent. She said she personally did because he was an expert and he was said to be a good person. And so she wanted to believe that he was innocent. But the fact is, everyone is innocent. Shannon Bream's innocent. Paula Duncan is innocent. I'm innocent until proven guilty. That is our God-given right under the Constitution of the United States. You are not just thought to be innocent. You are not just, I want you to be innocent. You are innocent until a jury of your peers says otherwise. So that distinction needs to be made because I think too often we allow the left to shape the conversation. They frame everything as Republican, automatically guilty, also a racist, also mean, likes to kick puppies and, you know, roast, baby toes for dinner every night in secret, cloven hooves, etc. That's why I say the cloven hoof things about when Democrats get happy about something, I refer to their trotters or their cloven hooves because that's the stuff they say about us. I don't care to hear how that's not right. That's what I do. So when you're talking about this whole case and how the judge basically had to smack these people across the hands over and over again to get them back on topic, and then they had some testimony that they heard. One was from someone who flipped, another bit of testimony from a woman who they found credible. They completely removed from consideration one bit of testimony because they felt like the guy flipped and he was so rabidly anti-Trump that he wasn't a good, credible witness against Manafort. So they went to the documents and they had boxes and boxes of folders that were numbered and labeled that they could look at that the prosecution said proved the case on all 18 of the charges. They had one holdout on 10 of the charges, which is why out of the 18, only 8 were convicted on. She talked about that a little bit and also about the behavior of the Mueller team, which, again, fascinating interview with her. She was so calm and dispassionate that she had a lot of credibility with me, not because she's a Trump supporter, but because she articulated in numerous points throughout the interview how they approach this as their civic duty, which I find to be very honorable and admirable on their part to set aside their political leanings and really consider whether or not this man who they all thought, this guy's an expert, he seems like a very decent person, But did he commit these crimes that he's being accused of? That's what we're here to decide. So we have to really look at this as jurors exercising our civic duty, which is given to us as citizens. The highest office holder in the land in America is the citizen. So let's listen to her finish up. I didn't get all of it. I wasn't going to let you listen to all of Shannon Bream's show on my show, but this part I thought was pretty important. It's number 3.
First of all, the Mueller team, what did you make of the prosecutors?
Well, at times I thought the prosecution was a little bored. I mean, I saw them napping during the trial.
Napping during the trial?
Andres and Van Grack especially. Yeah. So it kind of sent a message of, we're bored with this. And I'm thinking, well, if you're bored, then why are we here?
Mm-hmm. But ultimately, they did a good enough job to convince you on several of these.
The paper
trail.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, because there were overwhelming amounts of documents, and I know that the judge at many times was trying to limit pictures and testimony about expensive items and all kinds of things, but certainly he left in the documents that he felt were the relevant ones you all needed.
Correct.
Okay, so let's talk about the Manafort team and the decision for Mr. Manafort himself not to testify. Did that influence you at all?
It did. I understand why they didn't do it. I mean, we're supposed to assume he's innocent, and therefore he does not need to defend himself. And the judge made that very clear, that there is no requirement for him to do so. However, just based on what I saw, what I heard, I think I would have liked to have heard a little more from the defense. They gave a very easygoing atmosphere to the whole thing. They objected to very little and appeared agreeable throughout it all. Their crosses were even very short when they cross-examined the witnesses. So I don't know. I think I expected a little more.
Okay. Now,
so apparently it was a very it was an easygoing type of a response from them. And I really don't have a lot of, like, I've read a few articles. Some people are putting forward that the reason why he did that is because he was running the table. He figured he only needed one juror to object to the charges, and one juror is enough for the jury to be hung, and it's an acquittal. And so he possibly could have, been using that strategy. It also could have been that with 18 counts and the way the way things were occurring, that perhaps he thought, I don't stand a chance here. I'm going to be convicted on at least one of these counts. They've got 18 counts. They're going to convict me on something. And so they didn't exert themselves. It might have been the type of legal representation that he obtained. We're not going to know that unless he writes a book, right? Or unless he gives an interview himself. And I think it's highly unlikely. What I find so stunning about Manafort's being held, in jail is that they have him in solitary confinement 23 hours a day. He hasn't raped or killed anybody. He hasn't kidnapped anyone. He's not in there on RICO charges. He's in prison for, these are like white collar crimes. These are white collar crimes. And he's in solitary confinement. So, look, I'm not a Manafort junkie. I've never heard of the guy until he came onto the Trump campaign to handle the so-called broker convention. I don't know anyone who knows Paul Manafort, at least that I'm aware of. So this isn't like a personal thing for me, but I find it heartbreaking that someone can commit a white-collar crime and be in solitary confinement away from human interaction 23 hours a day for months on end, while other people who rape women, rape children, et cetera, are out they're imprisoned, obviously, but they're out, sometimes they're out of jail before Paul Manafort's entire prosecution has occurred. They serve less than a year in prison for doing things like that. Some of these people, they go into prison and they're in these prisons where they have access to a library, a gym, they have a television room, they're eating 3 meals a day with, their new friends in prison. I'm not discounting the severity of life in prison, but I'm saying it's one thing to be in prison. It's another thing to be in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day. It's wrong. It's wrong. And so, I don't know all of the ins and outs on how they're like, well, you have to be in solitary confinement. I don't know if he did something to deserve that. As far as I can read, he hasn't done anything specifically to deserve being confined. But just look at the lengths to which people on the left will go to get Donald Trump. I mean, it's astounding. It's truly astounding. And I for one, I can't actually, there's no justification for it. Unless he's biting people or, shivving people. And that's why they put him in solitary confinement. And we have no evidence of that, because that would be on the news. Someone would say, Donald Trump made him shiv somebody in the prison. That's what people would say. So we know that's not happening. So we're going to take calls in the first segment of the second hour. That's how we're going to handle this. Because we usually take calls now, but we only have 3 minutes left in this segment. So if you want to get in the call queue, the call lines are 866-963-2037. You can weigh in on anything that we've covered this whole hour. Mason's interview, the Manafort jury participant, Paula Duncan, the transgenders bill. So I want to give you the last little bit of information on that, because I kind of covered it, the whole thing, while we were talking to Mason Weaver. And what's so interesting about this is that I love the little graphic. If you're watching one of the streams, look, this is one of the signs on the bathrooms in North Carolina after they passed that bill restricting transgender bathroom access. The 21C Museum Hotel in Durham, North Carolina, made a hybrid man and woman with the note underneath that says, "We don't care." And that was their new bathroom sign. People are going to people, I tell you what. So this bill to allow the third gender option, it's on Massachusetts driver's licenses, was derailed when the legislator forced the vote on the 73 gender options available on Facebook. So how he pulled this off was he used a procedural maneuver. As is procedurally required, each of the amendments were to be given 10 minutes for debate and 3 for voting. With the knowledge that his Democratic colleagues could not explain away any of the genders without undoing the ideology of transgenderism, which holds that biological sex is socially constructed and gender is innate, Lyons introduced each of the 73 genders as a separate amendment on the evening of July 31st. After he filed 35 of them, House leadership saw that he was running out the clock and they would not have sufficient time before the midnight deadline to pass the driver's license bill and other legislation on the docket. Accordingly, the Democratic leadership withdrew the bill at 10:45 p.m. so they could get the rest of their priorities taken care of. And because they just didn't want to argue about the 73 genders, because there is no argument that supports it cogently, that they wanted to be on tape, because they eventually have to come back up for election. There's 2 reasons why this story is super important. The first reason, this is what it looks like when you go to war prepared. This guy knew, just arguing on its face about the one bill, the X designation on the driver's licenses, he wasn't going to win that because they'd already prepared for that. So he went the extra mile. He went not just the extra mile, but he looked into the procedures and said, well, I know how a bill is filed. You got to have 10 minutes plus 3 minutes for voting. So 10 minutes plus 3 minutes for voting. And then he looked around and said, who else is talking about genders? Well, Facebook. Facebook has become so ubiquitous that you can't discount what they're doing. They're actually creating policy through their actions on that platform because so many of us participate on it. And so if it's good for Facebook, he's basically asserting that it's good for Massachusetts. And he knew that those legislators didn't want to have to argue about what Facebook is doing. Brilliant. This is how you win. This is how you fight. You fight with all of the tools that are available to you. I commend this man. Let me not just call him this man. Representative Jim Lyons of Andover, Massachusetts, Republican. I salute you, sir. If we had a segment called I Salute You, Sir, he'd be the banner winner for this week. That's winning. That's the way it's done. All right, hour 1, that's over. Hour 2 is up next. Thanks for being here, but stay right there.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Hurricane Lane is still a Category 4 storm, and people in Hawaii are preparing for the worst. Tanya J. Powers has the latest.
With wind speeds from 130 to 156 miles an hour, Hurricane Lane is bearing down on Hawaii. Shelters opened on Oahu today as rain is starting to pour and cell phone alerts are being sent out. Officials are warning that those shelters will be crowded and should be used as a last resort. Ernie Lau is with the Honolulu Board of Water Supply and says people should be prepared.
Conserve, use water wisely, and budget for about a gallon per person per day for a 14-day period.
President Trump has approved a disaster declaration request by Hawaii's governor. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
President Trump held a roundtable today with lawmakers and top White House officials to discuss the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act, or FIRMA. The president explained what is in the legislation.
This new authority will enhance our ability to protect cutting-edge American technology and intellectual property vital to our national security.
The president noted the act was included in the National Defense Authorization Act that he signed into law earlier this month. A federal court ruling demonstrates the need to have Roe v. Wade, the U.S. Supreme Court decision of 1973, overturned. Charlie Butts has the story.
Alabama passed a bill subsequently signed into law that would ban the practice of dismemberment abortions, removing the living preborn baby from the womb one limb at a time until it dies. The 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals has overturned the law, stating it puts a limitation on a woman's ability to obtain an abortion. Eric Johnston of the Alabama Pro-Life Coalition was asked if the court got it right.
If you look at it in light of the present constitutional law, yeah, it's what is required. If you look at it in the light of the fallacy of Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey, they got it wrong.
Roe v. Wade is current precedent, and federal judges must rule on the basis of what emerges from the Supreme Court. Johnston points to Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, who said recently Roe v. Wade is settled law.
But you know, law is never settled. It is always continues in the pipeline of argument with variations and reviews. And Roe is settled in what it says, but it may not be settled in the ultimate outcome of the abortion issue. And for 45 years, the abortion issue has not gone away. So I think that's the significance of what's going on right now.
The only way states can pass abortion restrictions and keep them in place is if the Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade, which would only mean states would then have the authority to deal with the abortion issue. I'm Charlie Butts.
The leader of an advocacy group that monitors the content of TV shows says the cable network is ruining family-friendly shows by airing explicit and vulgar promos inside the shows. Bill Bumpus explains.
Monica Cole with 1millionmoms.com says for about the last 4 years, TV Land has been airing shows in the evening with explicit, non-family-friendly content such as Teachers and Younger. The problem, she explains, is the promos for those shows are running in the day during family-friendly programming, and the content of the promos are just as bad.
These long-time old reruns that would be rated G, you're sitting down with your family, and then the commercial breaks come on for programs that are rated 14 or MA for mature. That completely ruins the family viewing time. So I feel that TV Land should keep the commercial breaks the same rating as the program that's airing.
Cole goes on to tell AFN,
Not really sure the appeal to air commercials with such explicit content with so many innuendos during family viewing time and during family-friendly programs, except for the fact that TV Land wants to introduce these topics to our children.
Cole believes the shows Teachers and Younger should not be airing at all, but at the very least, TV Land should tone down the content and the promos of the shows. I'm Bill Bumpus.
And sales of new U.S. homes slumped 1.7% in July, the second straight monthly decline. The Commerce Department says newly built homes sold at a seasonally adjusted annual rate of $627,000 last month. For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
It's time to call your senators. We need to tell them to put an end to the liberals' filibuster, switch to a majority vote, and defund Planned Parenthood. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Senators respond to constituent calls. So call 202-224-3121 3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacey on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Now, Stacey Washington.
On the left, it's pure politics. They're playing with people's lives. Again, American citizens and people who legitimately want to come here who aren't criminals. They're playing with their lives for politics. And by the way, the Democrats have this wrong. Because in Texas, and I ran on a very strong border security campaign 4 years ago as lieutenant governor, and I got nearly 50% of the Hispanic vote. Hispanic Americans want this same protection. They want law and order. They don't want hardened criminals crossing the border into their neighborhoods, and a lot of this crime goes on in their neighborhoods. So the Republicans need to get a backbone and change. Yes,
they also want people to follow the laws. I mean, I've spoken with legal immigrants who said, I waited in line, waited my turn, and I'm very proud to be an American.
Absolutely. And they are proud. And there are more people who want to come to this country. We are a country of immigrants. We in the Republican Party honor legal immigration. But the president has to get the funding for this wall. McConnell has to change the rules. And the voters in this country in November have to be sure that we don't lose Congress to the Democrats.
Yeah. So that's Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who he's fired up. And you know why? Because they have a lot of crime on the border between Mexico and Texas, and they have a lot of their citizens who are just it's like a war zone down there, and they don't get any support because, you know, they're Texas. And I'm into it. I was born in Texas. I'm into it. I got Texas fever. I've always had it, always will. I love me some Texas. It's awesome. We'll talk about it in a whole nother segment about that gas station they have down there. If y'all know what I'm talking about. If you're in Texas right now, God bless you, because y'all do everything extra. So Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has been he's been a very strong voice. And he said, you know, the Republicans need to get a backbone. And they do. What are the Republicans doing right now? Why are they not strong-arming the Democrats? Why are they even letting the Democrats act like they have any control? They spent the last 12 months barely doing anything, like they don't have control. I know they have a very slim margin, and they can't. They have 2 senators in the Senate who they just get picked off so easy. But is it not that they're supposed to be out doing, you know, the smoky backroom deal or whatever it's called, and just telling their colleagues, look, not only are you not going to get any money this cycle, but we're not going to be your friend on cable news. We're not going to be in the media defending you and acting like you're one of us if you're not with us on immigration. That's a signature issue for the president. We can't get you on that. We're going to be looking for somebody to primary. We're going to be on somebody else's side. Why is that not happening? So we're going to go to the phones. If you want to talk, 866-963-2037. Let's listen to the rest of this audio. So the first bit you're going to hear is Senator Chuck Grassley missing the fact that E-Verify can be circumvented via a fake ID in the Molly Tibbetts case. So the guy who killed Molly Tibbetts was an illegal immigrant. What he did was he stole somebody else's identity and created a fake ID. He used that fake ID to circumvent the E-Verify system because he was working for a Republican, and the Republican put him through E-Verify. He was able to get a positive approval through E-Verify and start working for this guy, but he was here illegally. So Senator Chuck Grassley talks about the fact that we need universal E-Verify. We do. It would definitely cut down on some of this drama, but it's not going to be a complete fix-all. It's not a catch-all. And then Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick, comes back on and starts taking it to CNN and MSNBC. I mean, it's brutal. It's number 5.
Stricter border security measures, including increased personnel, enhanced technology, and modernized infrastructure, could have prevented this man from crossing the border. In other words, secure the border. Stronger interior enforcement and addressing weaknesses in E-Verify could have prevented this individual from working and would have allowed Immigration Enforcement Authority to initiate removal proceedings years ago.
He says E-Verify could have prevented this.
And we've passed E-Verify in Texas for all of our government contractors and government contracts, and we will do that for private business as well. We've done it in steps. We've put billions again into border security. We've added 250 state troopers, another Texas Ranger company. We're doing everything we can. And the president is right on this. Look, I've lived this issue as a border lieutenant governor and senator. I've been down there many times. Congress has to act. And you know, again, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, most of the print media in this country, and the Democrats, they are all accomplices in the death of this young girl and the death of everyone else.
And then he went on to take on Geraldo Rivera for saying, you know, everybody that's on the side of the illegal immigrants is kind of like, oh, well. I mean, would you feel like, oh, well, if your own child died? I've said that before, but I just don't understand how people can behave this way, how people can act as if this is okay. It's as if they don't have anybody that they love, or maybe they just can't fathom it. What's also interesting is that they don't seem to care that she was a bit of a liberal, this girl, Molly Tibbet. You know, so she's technically, because we're so factionalized in this country, she's kind of technically one of theirs. But people on the right seem to care more about her death than people on the left. And she was, you know, politically aligned with them. It's so odd. It's hard to really, you're sitting there thinking, is this real? It is. It's definitely real. And it's what's happening in this country because we don't have a sealed border. We're never going to, let's, because we need a reality check. Because I'm so tired of people saying, well, if we built a wall, they'll just fly over it. Since when have illegal immigrants been flying over walls in this? I mean, they've climbed over them, but they haven't flown over them. They're not that advanced yet. And they'll just tunnel under it. Well, the new walls have a provision. It's rebar and a bunch of stuff that's sunken under the ground. So instead of having a regular footing like a fence, the fence is actually below ground as well as above ground. Catch up with the technology. We're not talking about building a fence here. We're talking about building a wall, a technologically advanced interactive wall. That's what we want. We have that kind of technology and everything else. Why don't we have it at the border? Second of all, we're never going to be able to stop everyone from coming here illegally. So we're never going to have a 100% effective rate. But right now we're at like 0. So how about if we get a little bit above that? How if we shoot for maybe stopping 50% of the illegal immigration or 50% of the physical base, like crossing borders based, and then stopping all of the visa overstays. I mean, that should be pretty simple for us to do. In a nation like ours, with our technological advances, we should be able to say to somebody, your visa has expired. I don't know how you're still working here. You need to get out. There's something smoking back to your country once every 24 hours. That's how it is in this country. You can fly from any point in this country out of the country. All you got to do is buy yourself a plane ticket, and within 24 hours, you are in another country. Even the most far-flung areas of the world, you can get there from out of our country because we have 1 billion flights a year. So you can find something to get on that's smoking hot and get on up out of here. Goodbye. You need to go. Not because I'm xenophobic or afraid of you, but because you have overstayed your visa. They don't allow that in Germany. I can't just, as much as I love Germany, I grew up there and I've been back there since I grew up. And every time I go, I just breathe in that German air and I look at all of those, you know, hundreds of years old these buildings are. Because here in America, everything's relatively new. But in Germany, everything is old. Like they have skyscrapers and stuff, but in the towns, all of those buildings are so old. And so you're walking around and the grass is green. It's super green. It's a lush country. And Germans are interesting people. They are not like Americans. And so every time I'm in Germany, my heart is there. I love that country. So let's say I get over there and I'm enjoying myself. I'm spending time with long lost friends and I'm shopping and I'm buying up all the German candy that I can get my hands on, even though I'm off sugar. And I'm just doing it up in high style. And my visa to be there is for the normal tourist visa, you know, so I'm supposed to be there for about 120 days. And then I'm just enjoying myself so much. I get a job babysitting somebody's kids, so I'm off book, you know. I'm getting paid in cash and euros. And I'm just still there. Do you think the German authorities are going to say, oh, she came here in love? Or she's black, we can't deport her? Or the thing is, she's a German citizen. She's just undocumented. No, those Germans will have me at the Frankfurt airport, the Frankfurt International Airport, with the plane tickets so fast. I'm telling you, they don't play. And it's not just Germany. The country to our immediate south. In Mexico, any citizen can arrest you and take you to the jail and have you incarcerated if you're in the country illegally. They don't even play around with all this immigrations and customs enforcement, border patrol enforcement, Homeland Security, all these agencies. They don't have time for that. They don't have the money either. What they do is they just say, any citizen, if you know someone's here illegally, in other words, if they're not giving you a kickback for being here illegally, you can take them to jail. Look how long they kept Tamarisi. He drove into Mexico by accident. He got lost. They apprehended him and held him in jail. They wouldn't even let him go. And Barack Obama was so hardcore. He was like, well, he shouldn't have got lost. That's what GPS is for. He barely even tried to get the guy out. He was in jail for a long time. Again, how is that right? If you believe in fairness, you should be just enraged that anybody would be allowed to go to jail and, you know, they're innocent, or anybody would be placed in solitary confinement like Manafort for a white-collar crime. You should just be upset by that. So, you know how it is when you're praying about something. You're like, oh, you know, I would like to know yada yada yada, and you know, God is faithful; He will let you know. And I was wondering why we have so much of this going on. We have a Christian nation, largely, you know, in large part, although many of us are, as Christians, are cultural Christians, and so that's why we don't have power and authority, and we don't have victory in our lives. And when we are looking at what's happening in the border, where these people are coming over our border, and we're the strongest nation on earth. We are militarily supreme, yet we have illegals overrunning this country and killing our citizens, raping them, kidnapping them, et cetera, et cetera. And I just wondered, you know, why is this happening? And I feel like then of course I'm reading one of my favorite books about prayer. And as I'm reading it, I realized, because the chapter that I just happened to be reading about was fasting. So prayer and fasting moves the hand of God. And in historical times, recent and biblical times, when nations were under attack or threat of attack, they would fast and pray, and the Lord would protect them. And so America's Christians, we are called to fast and to pray for the protection of our nation, but also for, good government, for justice to be done, regardless of political party. If you're a Christian, you want justice to be done, regardless of who is, you know, like Paul Manafort. As much as I wanted him to be innocent, like Ms. Duncan was talking about, the juror, they found him to be guilty on those 8 charges because the evidence supported his guilt. And so, you know, I stand by that, not because I saw the evidence, but because a jury of his peers found him guilty. And so that is where we have to be, regardless of political ideology. And so in that same vein, we should want Hillary Clinton to be prosecuted for what she did, because other people who aren't famous have gone to jail for doing less than what she did. And we should also want anyone who has participated in trying to subvert the election on the American side, not just the Russians, but people on the American side, they should be prosecuted as well. Whether they work for the FBI or the DOJ, wherever they work, they should be held accountable as well. And so what we have to do is we have to humble ourselves, and we have to fast and pray. And when we decide to do that as a nation, as the Christians in this nation, we're going to start to see some justice and an end to the lawlessness that is at our southern border. But it's a symptom. The Bible says we have not because we ask not. That's what's going on here. We have not yet prayed and fasted and asked the Lord to move on our behalf to protect us in our southern border and also in the visa overstays. And because of that, we are seeing this lawlessness. And we got to be praying and fasting that our legislators would find their backbone, that these Republicans would find their backbone. So we know what we have to do. Okay, when we get back, we're going to have Geoff Dickens from Newsbusters. Come on, y'all. You know the Newsbusters guests are always awesome and on point. So stay there. We'll be right back.
I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Well, the last 2 years, we've just had tremendous response, early response to the announcement that we're going to Israel on a Holy Land tour. We're going March of this year. We go March of every year. Last year, we filled up like early fall, and I expect us to fill up early fall this year as well. So if you're interested in this March 14th through the 22nd tour, and you'll be going with primarily supporters of AFA and AFR, just get the brochure and check it out. You can call us today at 800-FAMILIES, 800-FAMILIES, option 5, and leave us your name and your address, and we'll mail you a brochure. If you simply want to go online, all the information is there. It's at twholyland.com, twholyland.com. If you want to go in March, we're filling up, and we're filling up fast. So check it out, twholyland.com.
Hello, this is Bishop Harry Jackson of Hope Christian Church in Beltsville, Maryland. Jesus said you would do greater works than he did. God says, hey, if you do my will, I'm not only going to back you in ways you have never seen, I'm going to protect, I'm going to provide, and I'm going to be with you. Start small, but dream big. What's dreaming big? Dreaming big is knowing that God is going to use you, hoping against hope, not settling that I got to do the status quo and do what everybody else did in order to get this little bit that I want. I'm just one of the little people. I'm a nobody. All the big people today were nobodies at one point. Everybody that's famous now came through that terrible tunnel of anonymity, of being looked over, passed over, refused, underfunded, left behind, rejected, dejected, subjected to whatever others wanted to put on him. But sometime, Psalm 66 says, of God, I have allowed men to ride over your heads, but I brought you out into a wealthy place. God wants to bring you out, me out, as we start small and dream big. We're faithful and we walk in his anointing. We let God dream his dream through us. We operate in teamwork to the glory of his name. We let our little ego take a lower place to his glory, and God, bam, shows up and does something that we can't do.
Still trying to reach your guest, Stacy.
Okay, I can come back in.
Or on the web at thehopeconnection.org.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey there. We're still working on getting our guest, Geoff Dickens from Newsbusters. I wanted to tell you guys about this story, and I feel like we're getting close to a place where everybody is just going to be so fed up. So you might have seen, and these two things connect together tangentially. You might have seen last night or this morning an announcement by CNN that they have suspended a contributor of theirs. His name is Paris Denard. He's a man I happen to know personally, a generous individual. And I promise you, he really is that person that you see on television. He's very patient. He's an upstanding individual. And I'm saying that because that's what I know of him. And so it's come to light that at a previous place where he worked, he was involved in some, basically some inappropriate behavior with some of his coworkers who were women. He was propositioning them for dates and things like that, and also using some language that was inappropriate for the workplace. He was fired for that behavior from that organization, and he went on to get other jobs. He's worked at a number of different places since then, and now he's with CNN, where you often see him. He's also a surrogate for the White House, where you often see him defending the president and the president's policies. He did so in a clip that I did not play on the show, although I did watch it yesterday. It was from the night before that, where they were talking about the security clearances. And it might have been a couple of days ago. It all runs together when you're looking at so much audio. And in the clip, this former CIA person, whose last name is Mudd, Mr. Mudd, was on there losing his mind because Paris Denard said that if you have an active security clearance, it makes you more valuable in the private sector to provide commentary, or if you're a consultant in a consulting business, if you can say, I'm a current security clearance holder at the secret level, top secret SCI, so secure, compartmentalized, so that's even better than top secret. And there's even stuff above that. And if you can do that, Paris Denard asserted that you are able to earn more money. Well, Mudd took great offense to that and said he's not being paid, and completely switched around what Paris Denard said, and he told him to get out. In other words, they're not in the same room, but he said get out. A few times. He was really off the chain. Paris didn't break a sweat. He just stuck with the conversation and continued to defend. And he did such a good job of it that the president tweeted Paris Denard and said, perhaps Mudd's security clearance should be snatched because he appears to be an unstable individual. Well, all of a sudden, after that interaction and a tweet from the president, now this old news about him getting fired from this job years ago is now current news, and he's being fired again. Mind you, he's already been punished for the behavior once by losing the previous position, but now he has to lose the current position too? See the double standard there? So I want to unpack that a little bit, and we'll get back to it. But right now we're going to go to our guest, Geoff Dickens of Newsbusters, and we're talking about this media coverage of the Manafort trial. Geoff, thank you for joining the show today.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. Apparently, the Manafort trial is the only thing that matters right now.
Right, yes. The Manafort trial, the Michael Cohen, the media is pushing it, and they're bringing up the I word already, impeachment. Certainly on the cables yesterday, MSNBC and CNN. Yeah, so they're kind of a one-track mind at this point.
So why? Is it because they're dancing around on their cloven hooves, as I have said many times today on the show, because they think impeachment is imminent?
Yeah, they. I mean, remember, everyone's in their own little bubble, and the liberal media is in their bubble. They think that this is over, that this is how they're going to get Trump, and it's just only a matter of time and days. And meanwhile, of course, the other side is our side is sort of just like, this is at most a campaign finance violation possibly, and even that's really not clear. It's certainly nothing like what happened. I did a piece yesterday about Whitewater, where you had Bill Clinton, a sitting president, who had to give a testimony at a trial involving his close friends and business partners, Jim and Susan McDougal, that it was a fraud trial. So they averaged only 36 seconds per night back in '96 on that coverage on the evening news, broadcasting the news, and this time with the Paul Manafort trial, which didn't even last a month, they averaged 2 minutes and 18 seconds per night.
So I mean, I don't get it. I just want to run down a couple things that I know are news that they could be talking about, like Reality Winner. Remember that name? This chick just got the longest sentence ever for leaking U.S. secrets to the news media, and she's pretty young. She got a 63-month sentence. She was sentenced by a federal judge in Augusta, Georgia. The longest sentence ever given for a federal crime involving leaks to the news media. This chick is literally like making news. That's news, and they're not gonna cover it.
Right. No, and the other point too is, like, the Manafort trial, there was nothing about Russia collusion. There was nothing about Trump wasn't even involved with the Manafort trial. I mean, you're talking, the case was Manafort himself being involved in tax fraud cases, but they're trying to push him to flip. But other than that, there's nothing here about Trump.
Yeah. So that was one of the things that we saw on, and I I'm going to post the link to your piece over at Newsbusters. It's called Flashback When the Media Didn't Care About the President's Criminal Friends. And you kind of lay it all out right here. Like it's all the details, all the facts. So I'll put that in the live stream. I'm kind of fascinated by the fact that, so this, I don't know if you saw, there's this great interview with Manafort juror Paula Duncan. And she's talking about, yes, you saw that. So what I found fascinating about her chat with Shannon Bream was that in certain instances during the trial, they had people come forward and testify. And when people testified that they found incredible, they were not credible to the jury, it was largely due in part to the fact that they flipped. So they were guilty, but they received immunity for their testimony. And they flipped against Manafort. And so that kind of went against their credibility. And so by the same token, even though they want all of us to believe that Cohen is this upstanding library official, like he's, you know, when he's not baking brownies for Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and pushing old ladies' carts in the grocery store parking lot, he's, you know, manning, I don't know, the library. I mean, they want us to think he's just this wonderful person. But the fact is, he was on the news in a clip saying he would do anything for President Trump. He would do anything for him. And then he flipped and said now that the president's guilty of collusion and he has evidence of all these things. So why would a jury consider his testimony and find it to be credible? Beyond that, why would the news media offer him this cloak of credibility after he's literally contradicted himself?
Well, it's pretty clear. It's like we just saw this recently with our good friend Omarosa, where they couldn't stand her, and now she's all over the news media because she's against Trump. It's really that simple. You're for Trump. Are you for the narrative in terms of building the case to get Trump impeached? Then we like you. If you're not, then no, forget you. You're not credible. Right. It's blatant. It's blatant.
Yeah, and so if you're just tuning into the show, I'm speaking to Geoff Dickens of Newsbusters. He's got a piece up over there. It's really good. Nice, decent-sized read. So in other words, this is not a 1,500-word piece. You can get through it and get the gist of it. And it's great information to have at your back pocket because what I love is so you're drawing a contrast between basically the same media. A lot of the same people work in the media now that worked in the media back when the Clinton scandals were our, news of the day. And they had no problem with Bill Clinton testifying in a trial where if Trump were to testify anywhere, you know what they'd say? Well, he's guilty, you know. You know he's guilty, right? You know he's guilty. They would have a field day with that. Look at him. He's testifying as a sitting president. Look how he's dragging down the office of the presidency. I mean, I can imagine what they're saying about him if he were to do that. So I just, like Chuck Todd, someone who expects to be taken seriously by people on the right. He's using on the August 21st edition of his NBC Nightly News, the Paul Manafort stuff is serious. It shows you that Mueller's got plenty to go on here and it isn't a witch hunt. Based on what? Help me. Based on what? Oh, no. Have we lost our guest?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did.
No, I'm saying to you, like, based on what how can Chuck Todd say that the Paul Manafort stuff is serious in relation to Donald Trump? It's serious for Paul Manafort because he's facing jail time. But it's not serious for Donald Trump because Donald Trump didn't even know Paul Manafort when these things that he's been convicted of were occurring.
You're right. It's a really weak link, and again, because they're trying to build all these verdicts came down at the same day, so they could sort of build this narrative of Michael Cohen, Trump's former attorney, Paul Manafort, Trump, former campaign manager. Even though, as you did point out, Manafort wasn't working for this is all this stuff that happened well before Manafort was working for Trump, and Manafort didn't even work that long with him. But it is. It's just it's that narrative. It's just like, okay, can you help build help build the impeachment case? And it doesn't matter that it's barely linked.
So turning to Cohen then, because I think the Manafort thing, the thing about the Manafort trial and case that is most disturbing to me is that the man is being kept in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day. I cannot understand or fathom why that is being allowed, why the judge is forcing him to do that. It's impacting his mental health if that's what's actually happening. You know it is. And so it's terrible. It's a miscarriage of justice, especially since it was done before he was convicted. It's one thing to put someone in solitary after they've been convicted of some heinous crime. It's another thing to keep them in solitary while they're being tried. It's just ridiculous. But I'm moving to Cohen, which that's what liberals are now calling their smoking gun. They've taken to calling the president of the United States an unindicted co-conspirator. Exactly what is it that Cohen could say that wouldn't be his word against the president of the United States?
You know, unless he has some sort of like recordings or, I mean, lately I've been kind of just sort of skeptical if there's anything there in terms of recordings. I mean, Omarosa was bragging about, I've got recordings, I've got receipts, and there's nothing there. I have yet to see anything. I see a lot of smoke, but I don't see any actual fire when it comes to the whole thing. All of the startup was about Russian collusion, and so far we haven't seen anything that ties the Trump campaign to Russia.
Yeah, but at this point, Jeff, I don't think the leftists care about Russian collusion anymore. They would love to be able to prove it, but they don't actually care about that. What they care about is getting something with which to impeach the president. And Maxine Waters doesn't even feel like we need anything particular. She feels like we can impeach him just because we don't like him. So with the Democrats looking at the midterms, does it feel to you as if the timing of this and the media furor surrounding this puts Mueller in jeopardy of having his investigation appear to be something that's being used to influence the midterm?
I think that's already pretty clear. Yes, I think if the Democrats were to win in the midterms, and I'm sure the media feeling a little bit, you think this is going to help the Democrats win seats. The next 2 years will be the Democrats, if they win control, will be them conducting hearings in even as flimsy as certainly the Manafort thing here and the Cohen thing seems. They can tie up Congress for the next 2 years. And that's what the liberal media wants. They just want to slow play. Even if it doesn't end in the Trump impeachment, they can just, kill the 2 years of Trump's first term, and then then it's time for another presidential election. So that's a big part of the plan here.
Yeah, but I just don't see Americans letting that work. We're right now on the air, with this huge audience nationally. And it's the tip of the spear people. That's what I like to call, the people who live in the more rural parts of the country, conservatives who are in big cities, but they still live like they're in the rural part of the country. They know how to cook. Mm-hmm. They know how to clean their own, their own homes, and they take care of their own vehicles. They're very self-reliant, gun owners, people who go to church once or twice or 3 times a week. Those kind of salt of the earth folk are not seeing this it's a spectacle as something that's going to make them stop voting for Republicans. So do you see some other strategy that the Democrats are going to employ to get their voter base out other than, look, he's evil and some people he knows have been convicted of something?
Well, that is it. That's what the media and the Democratic Party, they're just going to push. Look, there's something there, and they're going to try to drive out their base. That's kind of where these elections are coming down to. Is like, can you get your base out? It's been that way pretty much since, I think, the 2000s. So the question is, the media also, conversely, in terms of driving up the Democrats and getting them all excited about impeachment, they want to depress the GOP base and Trump supporters and just say and try to think, oh no, is there something here? And most won't be fooled, but who knows? Maybe some would be like, oh gee, maybe there is something really bad here, and they won't come out to vote. So at least I think that's their game plan.
I don't see that working, but anything's possible. And I'd rather not look at the polls. I'd rather just have people be very motivated to go out and vote for the candidates they feel will represent them in the best way. Geoff Dickens of Newsbusters, thank you so much for joining in today.
Thank you so much.
All right, great to have you here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. So that is another segment down. We're closer to the end of the show, y'all. Yeah. When we get back, we're going to be talking about Ambassador Bolton, or actually, he's changed jobs so many times. Look at me messing it up. He warned Russia on further election interference, making it clear that we won't tolerate meddling in 2018. We're going to talk about that when we get back. Stay there.
Winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
In practice each week, our team would run our plays against the look squad. That's what we call our backup players who simulate the other team's techniques as closely as possible. When we run a play and see it executed successfully in practice, we have the confidence to run it successfully during the game. Visualization increases chances of success, not just in football but in any area of life. Think of life as practice and the visions and instructions of Scripture as a look squad. When you read God's Word on a regular basis, you'll discover what your future holds. Seeing God in your tomorrow is the key to having confidence and courage today.
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
My name's Tim, I'm 17. All the male role models in my life did drugs, so it's no wonder I ended up just like them. I was down to 90 pounds when I came to Teen Challenge, but now I'm healthy and drug-free.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
There was a time where I was in the middle of doing something, and the Lord just really impressed upon my heart that I needed to buy my wife some flowers. I hadn't thought about it, hadn't done it in a while. I walk into the door of our little small apartment, and I have the flowers in my hand, and my wife's eyes connect with mine. Her eyes just well up with tears. And I immediately start thinking, what's wrong? What happened? What's going on? And she said, Abe, I've been wanting some flowers, but I know what our financial situation is, and I didn't want to be an additional burden on you because I know things are tight now. And man, it was just a moment where my wife and I just fall more deeply in love with the Lord and more deeply in love with one another.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekday afternoons at 5 Central on Urban Family Talk.
By relying on him. Oh, God. Oh, Lord, I thank you. I thank you, Lord. I thank you, Lord.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey, welcome back to the program.
Have I understood your introduction?
Thanks so much for being here. We're going to listen now to Mike to Bolton warning Russia on the further election interference.
If I understood your introduction, it's the issue, the discussions over election tampering, which was basically the barrier to a joint statement. I'm wondering, did you hear anything today that gave you optimism that Russia was not committed to interfering in the midterm elections? And what messages did you specifically send to warn your counterpart today that that would not be tolerated by the U.S. administration?
There were some double negatives in that question, if I heard it correctly. So at the risk of restating it or to put my answer in the form of an answer to a question that might have been asked but wasn't, I made it clear that we wouldn't tolerate meddling in 2018 and that we were prepared to take necessary steps to prevent it from happening. We talked about it in a variety of ways in the area of cyber and information technology exchanges, which we had stopped between the United States and Russia earlier this year. And I said at this point I didn't really see the circumstances were right to resume them again. I don't want to understate how much progress we made in other areas, but in that area it was as I've described.
Okay, so cleaning this up a little bit, that is former Ambassador John Bolton, who is now the National Security Advisor in the Trump administration. And he's talking about this idea that Russia is still meddling in the election. And I'm so tired of this because they've done this all along. They did it to an unprecedented degree using Facebook this last time, but they're not going to stop. I'm glad that Ambassador Bolton is putting his foot down and making it clear to them that we're aware of what they're doing and we're not going to put up with it. But where was all of this outrage when Obama said, oh, it's nothing? He did almost nothing to stop it. And then he used the nothingness that he implemented that allowed it to occur to set Donald Trump up to be the fall guy for something that is really Obama's fault. He could have put the kibosh on this. He could have tamped down on what they were doing, but he didn't. Anyway, so before we had Geoff Dickens on, I was talking about Paris Denard and this horrible, really horrible, the treatment that he's receiving, because it's a huge double standard. If you've already been fired for something and your new employer has hired you and then you've been hired again by someone else, then again by someone else, then if they're letting you go for something like this, you know what it is. It's CNN doesn't like Paris Denard coming on there and making their guests look like fools. And so now they want to get rid of him. They didn't have a good justification for letting him go, so they're using this as a way to just, he did something one time, and me too. Hashtag me too. We can't expect much from CNN, honestly. But for people who are out there trying to make this sound as if it's like some recent allegations have come to the fore, how? It was an employment matter. How was a sealed employment matter suddenly unsealed and made available to the media for the further persecution of Paris Denard? I refuse to join in on that pitchfork activity. I'm not going to do it. But it brings us to another tangentially connected incident, which is, so you got the Human Rights Campaign. You guys know about the Human Rights Campaign. It's this organization that advances the agenda for the LGBT, etc., XYZ movement. The Human Rights Campaign has what they call an educational arm that's pretty well funded, and it's called the HRC Foundation. So Mary Beth Maxwell resigned from the organization on Wednesday after a colleague of hers reported that she had used the N-word twice in front of another colleague. In an internal email to staff sent out earlier today, HRC President Chad Griffin said Maxwell had used the racist term once when recounting an upsetting personal story, and a second time when repeating the word in describing an external situation that she found horrifying, in which racial and homophobic slurs were used. So in other words, this woman, who I can't defend her ideology or the things that she does, or even this horrible place that she works for, or the other horrible place that funds the place that she works for, but she's retelling an event that has occurred, and she used the words that she heard, which included profanity and the N-word. And for that, she was fired. Well, she resigned, but she was forced out. Here's my problem with this. In this new reality that we're finding ourselves in, we're actually seeing the obliteration of intent. And a key facet of American law is intent. So you can be convicted of breaking the law when you didn't intend to because you didn't know it was the law. Ignorance of the law is not a defense. But when it comes to more serious allegations like murder, things like that, intent can be something that either ratchets up the severity of what you are charged with and the corresponding punishment, or it can ratchet it down. That's how you go from, someone killing someone by accident, and that's manslaughter. It's the intent that changes it. They didn't want to kill them. They didn't even know that their action would kill them. And so they have to be held responsible for killing someone, but it's manslaughter. And that's, a good example of how intent is used in American jurisprudence. And so when you're talking about that, and you look at what she's doing here, so she didn't use the N-word as a slur against another person. She didn't use it in a joke to demean another person. She didn't use it in a closed setting in which she felt that the other people with her were in approval of her use of the word. She used it in recounting stories where the word had been used, and instead of saying the N-word, she used the word. And she was fired for that. So I feel like we're approaching a place where we're going to hit the wall on this type of kind of thought police speech police. And in parts of the country, we've already hit that wall. You see people openly flouting these new so-called rules of order and convention because they're sick and tired of being told what they can and can't say. And it's these same people who fired her who would rapidly defend the use of the N-word in music and culture. And if you missed that program, I believe it was last week where we played audio from a pastor who was white, but he spent many, many years working in black churches. And he talked about how in America, it's okay for black people to make music about killing other black people. It's also okay for black people to make music about black women being, women of the night and all kinds of other horrible things about black women. That kind of music is allowed when it's made by black men or other black women. We don't make music about white women being those things or Asian women being those things or even Hispanic women being those things. It's only black women who are allowed to be framed and ingrained in the minds of others as being people who sell themselves for sexual, intercourse and things like that. And so when you see the same people who defend that type of music and say, we need that kind of music, that's free speech. We only need it from black people, but we need that. But then someone recounting a story in which the N-word was used, another profanity, and telling the story as it occurred, using the words, that's a fireable offense. Perhaps she shouldn't have used the language at work. She shouldn't have told a story at work. I mean, those are all kind of, internal employee type conversations. But wouldn't a warning have been better? Look, something happened to you. It was terrible, but you can't talk about that at work. But firing her and vilifying her or forcing her out? So in the memo that was issued to kind of cover what happened, they talk about her use of the term being inappropriate and harmful. And he told her that, and then he accepted her resignation. He says in the memo that when the allegations were reported to Human Resources, the organization launched an investigation, and upon receiving preliminary findings on Monday night, they immediately suspended Maxwell without pay. Then after he received the full findings of the investigation, he accepted her resignation. Now, Maxwell served in the Labor Department in the Obama administration and also wrote a note that was forwarded to all employees by HRC's chief of staff, in which Maxwell, who led the organization for the past 3 years, called her use of the N-word a mistake that caused harm to people that she loved and the work that she holds dear. She says she holds responsibility for use of the words and she has deep regrets. She says, in each instance, I was conveying something that really happened. In the first, I was emotional and scared that it had been said. And in the second, feeling urgency about addressing a deeply racist and homophobic encounter that a colleague recounted, but I should never have said that word out loud, period. So I abhor the use of the N-word. There's nothing like just going on about your business and having someone call you the N-word. It has happened to me in public twice now in my days on this earth. And it is something you just, first of all, you don't expect it. And the second of all, it's just like at this crazy moment where you're like, what did they just say? That being said, hurling a racial slur at someone and recounting a horribly difficult story, something that's happened, and retelling it in its entirety, those are two separate things. One is sharing something painful and tough that happened. The other one is, basically a verbal altercation. I find it interesting that this type of thought police and word police is happening. It's the left eating its own. This isn't a conservative think tank that this is happening at, although there's a story out today about something crazy going on in a conservative think tank list email. We might have time to get to that as well. I mean, it's just like an interesting day for news. But I find it interesting that this woman working at the Human Rights Campaign's Foundation, a fully leftist organization, that she's getting bitten for something that is supposed to be fully only the purview of Republicans. Remember, the only people who use the N-word are Republicans. The only people who are racists are Republicans. The only people who ever say anything that might be inflammatory or incendiary or painful for other people to hear, Republicans. Yet here we are, Mary Beth Maxwell, a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, working for a hard left organization that really wants to radically change the landscape of America, she just got let go from her job for recounting a tale in which some other person used the N-word as a slur, and somehow she's guilty of something for just telling that story. That's why this is so dangerous. Why it's so dangerous for us to allow liberals to frame how we communicate with each other and how we interpret our rights under the Constitution. That's why they don't like us giving out copies of the Constitution, because anyone who's ever read it and the Bill of Rights understands that most of the stuff that they're trying to get us to agree to is unconstitutional. So, you know, I had a friend joke, you know, up next, getting life in prison for using the word murder. So, wow, they're literally eating their own. So the other story, which is this is, I mean, only in America, only with liberals at the helm of almost everything. Here we go. You've got 80 minutes after a racially incendiary email, or 80 minutes after a conservative person wrote in about being let go. So this is a speechwriter for President Donald Trump. His name's Darren Beattie, and he wrote a listserv that had hundreds of conservative people on it. And he wrote the listserv to say, hey, anybody on this list with media influence, please come to my defense. I've been dismissed because I spoke at a conference alongside a racial provocateur. So I don't believe they spoke together. Like, you know how you're on a panel and you speak together, and sometimes people on a panel have radically opposing views. It's almost like a debate, but most of the time panels are people who have some similar expertise or background or opinion, and they each weigh in on whatever the questions are from the moderator. Well, apparently this speechwriter, Darren Beattie, was at a conference where a white supremacist spoke later in the program. So there is no evidence that Darren Beattie knew the white supremacist, or that he was in league with the white supremacist, or that he agreed with his views. In fact, that is one of the things that happens at conferences. Is you'll be at a conference and you'll be speaking out one topic, and then later in the panels, there'll be someone else who is presenting the opposing view to what you presented. And you can still be on the same side of the political aisle, but one person is saying, you know, we need to have amnesty, and you're on another panel saying amnesty is the devil. It's what leads to illegal immigrant crime. We need to seal the border. So this happens. But without doing any investigating or finding out what exactly was the reason why they were both speaking at the same conference, like maybe looking at the schedule and seeing what they were each speaking about, Darren Beattie was fired from the White House. He asked for help, and all of a sudden, everybody starts chiming in, and some racially incendiary things were said. And now the listserv has been disbanded. The listserv was a part of the Claremont Institute, which is a conservative think tank. So this infection created by the left, where we can't say anything to each other and nobody can be offended, has now, it's infiltrated right-leaning think tanks, and now they're disbanding stuff too. There has to be some higher level thought that's available to us that could prevent us from going down this road. God bless you. I'll be back with you tomorrow, Lord willing. Have a nice night.
All right, Miss Stacy, we got through it.
I think we did pretty good.
Oh yeah. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you for being in today. And in the morning, you'll let me know if you're doing it again.
Yeah, I will.
Okay. All right. Well, have a great night.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
You too.
American Family.